If you use a desktop computer every day, there's a good chance you simply leave it plugged into the wall all the time. You shut it down at night, come back the next morning, press the power button, and carry on. But that raises a surprisingly common question. Does leaving your desktop computer plugged in 24/7 actually hurt it? Some people worry that constant connection to electricity wears out the power supply or slowly damages the components. Others believe that repeatedly turning a computer completely off is actually worse. So what's really happening when your desktop stays plugged in even when it isn't running? Let's break it all down, right here, on History of Simple Things. Early personal computers were much less sophisticated when it came to power management. Computers were often simply switched on when needed and switched off when work was finished. As personal computers became more common, manufacturers began developing ways to reduce energy consumption without completely shutting down the machine. Sleep and standby technologies eventually allowed computers to enter low-power states while keeping enough information available for a quick return. Modern operating systems can now automatically turn off displays, enter sleep modes, or hibernate after periods of inactivity. Microsoft, for example, provides dedicated sleep and power management settings in Windows to reduce energy use when a computer isn't being used. Here's the first important distinction. A desktop computer being plugged into the wall does not necessarily mean it is consuming a lot of electricity. When you shut down a modern desktop, its power supply can enter a very low power state while still remaining connected to the electrical outlet. The computer may retain a tiny amount of standby power for things such as responding to the power button, USB wake functions, or network features, depending on how the system is configured. In fact, the U.S. Department of Energy notes that computers can consume standby power even when switched off or not performing their primary function, and modern energy efficiency standards specifically address this low power consumption. So simply leaving the plug in the wall isn't the same thing as leaving the computer running. This is where the situation changes. If your desktop is actually running all day and all night, it is consuming considerably more electricity than it would while shut down or sleeping. The exact amount varies enormously depending on the processor, graphics card, monitors, storage devices, cooling system, and what the computer is doing. A powerful gaming PC sitting idle is obviously different from a basic office desktop, and a computer rendering video overnight is using dramatically more power than one sitting at the Windows desktop doing almost nothing. That's why modern power management features matter. Windows can automatically turn off the display and put the computer into a sleep state after inactivity, reducing energy consumption without requiring you to shut everything down manually. This is one of the biggest myths surrounding computers. You may have heard that turning a computer on and off every day causes excessive wear because components experience a small amount of thermal expansion and contraction as temperatures change. While temperature cycling is a real physical phenomenon, that doesn't mean you should deliberately keep a modern desktop running constantly just to avoid pressing the shutdown button. The U.S. Department of Energy specifically recommends shutting computers down during long periods of non-use and states that using sleep and off modes does not shorten the computer's life. In other words, there's no general rule that says your desktop must stay running to protect its components. For a typical home computer, shutting it down when you're finished for the day is perfectly reasonable. The power supply is designed to handle normal operation, including being switched on and off. A properly functioning quality power supply isn't going to suddenly fail simply because you shut your computer down every evening. However, there's an important exception: power quality and electrical events. A computer that remains connected to the wall is still electrically connected to the building. During severe electrical disturbances, lightning events, or other power problems, connected equipment can potentially be exposed to damaging surges. That's why a good surge protector, or even better, an appropriately sized uninterruptible power supply can be useful, especially for expensive desktops and workstations. But remember, a basic surge protector isn't the same thing as a UPS, and neither makes a computer completely immune to every electrical problem. There are situations where keeping your desktop running makes perfect sense. Maybe you're hosting files, running a server, performing a long render, backing up data, downloading something large, or remotely accessing the computer. In these cases, shutting the machine down defeats the purpose. Even then, you don't necessarily need the monitor running. If the task doesn't require the display, letting the monitor turn off can reduce unnecessary energy use. The Department of Energy specifically recommends turning off the monitor when a networked computer needs to remain on for tasks such as backups. So the question isn't really, should my computer always be on? It's, does my computer need to be on? For most people, the sensible approach is surprisingly simple. If you're going to be away for a short period, let the computer sleep. If you're finished for the day and won't need it until tomorrow, shutting it down is perfectly fine. And if you have a specific task that requires continuous operation, leave it running and let the operating system manage the display and power-saving features. The bigger issue isn't whether the plug remains physically connected to the outlet. It's whether the computer is unnecessarily consuming energy for hours when nobody is using it. Modern desktops are built with power management in mind. Windows provide sleep, hibernate, and other power controls, while hardware can enter increasingly low power states when it isn't doing much work. So, should you leave your desktop computer plugged in all the time? Yes. Leaving it plugged into the wall while it's shut down is generally not a problem. There's usually no need to unplug your desktop every night just to protect its components. But leaving the entire computer powered on 24/7 when you don't actually need it is a different matter. It wastes electricity, produces unnecessary heat, and keeps components operating when they're not doing useful work. For everyday use, the best strategy is simple. Plug it in, use sleep for short breaks, shut it down for long periods of inactivity, and leave it running when there's a genuine reason to. Your computer doesn't need to be treated like a delicate houseplant. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do for it is simply let it take the night off. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.